Let's see, this is season number 92, is that right? Did I count wrong in the newsletter? It started in 1933. So this would be season 92 of the Tallahassee Historical Society. Holy cow. Welcome everyone. It's so good to see so many familiar faces and so many new faces. We're going to have a great season this year. We've got all these festivals coming up in the spring. We've got next month. We've got the Mikasuki coming to talk. And oh, by the way, our food this year, all of our food this year is being taken care of by the Mikasuki. A very generous gift they gave us. So we won't be pestering you for that. However, in case anybody feels really beneficial, we do have a jar out there that you can drop a donation in for next month if you want to for the food and all this stuff. But it's taken care of, and that, and what other stuff do I want to say? Our podcast, which we recorded last week, our podcast, where's Becky? Our podcast is now on. Becky, tell me, it's on Apple, it's on
Amazon Music, it's on Spotify, it's on Podbean. That covers it. If it's not somewhere that you would like it, let me know, we'll try to get it out.
Yeah, so we've got a pretty wide reach. I got an email the other day from somebody down in St. Augustine who was hearing our stuff and so forth and talking about how much they liked everything that we were doing. So it's, we've got a pretty wide reach, I think. What else? I will say this. Our speaker tonight is Karen, not Karen, Karen Sheffield. Karen spent 36 years with the Democrat, is that right? Keeping them solvent, is that right? It's increasingly hard to do. She's going to talk about street names in Tallahassee, and I think it's worth noting, although Marjorie will probably knock me in the head for bringing this up, if you saw the paper yesterday, the story in the paper, some legislator down in Miami has introduced a bill requiring every college and university to name a street after the late Charlie Kirk. And I've been trying to figure how that would work in Tallahassee. There'd be a Charlie Kirk Boulevard FAMU branch. There would be a Charlie Kirk Boulevard FSU branch. There would be a Charlie Kirk Boulevard TCC branch. I mean, how would that work? TSC, sorry. So anyway, who knows? There has been no Senate companion to that bill, so I'm not overly concerned about it. So anyway, I will thank you everyone for coming tonight, and thank the Mikasuki for the food, and thank you for Becky and everybody who's worked so hard. And I will turn this over to Karen right now.
Thank you. So we're going to talk about street names. I know as you drive through Tallahassee, you know where some of them came from. Paul, Collins, DeSoto, anything Jackson, obviously. And I bet you a lot of you remember when Capitol Circle circled the town, you didn't have to go in downtown. Do you know who Blair Stone or Raymond Deal was?
Yes.
Carl Pedrick, Dick Wilson. Well, I'm going to get to that if you don't. How about McCarty Street? Mr. William McCarty was the Secretary of the Territory from 1822 to 1834, so he probably deserved to have a street named after him. Well, in 1905, the Chittenden family, you know, I'm supposed to be doing these slides, I'm so sorry. We missed Monroe Street. And the Chittentons lived in this house on McCarty Street. In 1905, that's when their son Dudley was getting married to Annie Rawls, and her family lived on the street too. Well, Mrs. Chittenton was all about city improvement, and she got a lot of signatures in her neighborhood to change the name of the street from McCarty to Park Avenue. And so the city did it, but family story goes that she had an agenda, because she thought Park Avenue would look better on the wedding invitation. So you know Monroe and Jefferson. There's at least 18 streets that have the same name as presidents. Adams Street was named after John Quincy Adams, because he was the Secretary of State under Monroe, and Monroe was president. And though not a president, there is a Hamilton Street. And of course, let's talk about Andrew Jackson. He was a president, but we remember him because he was the Federal Military Commissioner of the territory in 1821. Now let's talk about all the streets. Jackson Road, Jackson Street, Jackson Bluff Road, Jackson Cove Road, Jackson View Drive, Andrew Jackson Way, Lake Jackson, even Tennessee Street, and Hermitage Boulevard with Rachel off of that. And then we've got Jacksonville and Jackson County. Governors, we have 29 governors where the street was specifically named after them. So I'm just gonna show you, I'm not doing well. I usually have somebody, Andrew. I'm gonna talk about governors, and here's a smattering of them. Governor William Jennings was one of 3 governors who had a naval ship named after him. The others were Duval and Hall. John Milton, in his last message to the legislature in 1865, was that he'd rather be dead than Florida rejoin the Union, and he went home and killed himself. Governor David Walker established the first public library here. Governor Napoleon Broward was the first resident of the governor's mansion, has 30 streets in Florida named after him. Brown Court and Street, but not the park, are named for Governor Thomas Brown. He was our only Whig governor. He owned a plantation, a popular hotel, and he ran a racetrack. Just so you know, Tom Brown Park is named for Thomas Irvin Brown Jr., a Leon High School coach from 1944 to 46. Governor John Branch, the last territorial governor, owned Live Oak Plantation, and his daughter Susan married Arva Hopkins, who was the owner of Goodwood. And by the way, W.W. Kelly was the first lieutenant governor, and that was after the Civil War. How about states? 25 streets have the same name as current states. Yep. Let's go back to Tennessee. We're on states. Someone usually does my slides for me, I'm sorry. As you go north on Monroe, you cross Tennessee, Virginia, Carolina, and Georgia. These are the states that most of the early settlers came from, and they were named for that reason. So days of the week. We have Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Months, we only have March, April, and May, though there is an August wood. And all the seasons are used in some manner in names. Trees, plants, fruits, and flowers are common all around town. We have crabapple, bayberry, quince, and nutmeg. Another common category is animals, birds, and bugs. So we have butterfly and cricket, and reindeer, gopher, even dragonfly. Numbers, we only have 1st through 10th avenues, and the only letter is G. Named roads of nearby cities include Thomasville, Miccosukee, and Monticello, but even Centerville was a nearby town from the 1820s to the 1930s. Pensacola Street, which ran directly north of the log cabin capital, St. Augustine Street, and Old St. Augustine Road were named for the former seats of government. Old St. Augustine Road originally was Bellamy Road, which ran through Tallahassee from Pensacola to St. Augustine. It was named for Mr. John Bellamy, a Monticello plantation owner, who built it between 1824 and 1826. That road followed the old El Camino Real in part, a road built under Spanish rule from Mission San Luis de Apalache to St. Augustine. But even they used native trails to build their road. Bellamy Road is considered one of America's oldest roads. In 1979, it was designated as a Florida Historic Civil Engineering Landmark, and part of it throughout the state is still called Bellamy. Some streets are from other cities. There's Raleigh, Miami, Kissimmee, Memphis, Natchez, Omaha, others. And colors. Well, we all know White Drive getting here today. There's indigo and green are the other standalone colors, but even green was named after Thomas Sherrill Green, a prominent real estate developer in the 1920s and 30s. But some colors are used as adjectives. Blue, 19 street names. We have Blue Boar, Blue Blazes, green in about 18 streets, and you know gold and golden. But you're probably thinking, what about orange? Well, that's a fruit, a color, or a county, I don't know. Did you know that some parallel streets into FAMU were named after counties? The former Pasco Street, luckily we still have Pasco Court, ran perpendicular to Liberty, Manatee, Nassau, Okaloosa, which now is gone, Osceola, and Palm Beach. Gulf, Okeechobee, St. Lucie, St. John's, Glades, and now Okaloosa are the only counties that don't have a street name. Speaking of FAMU, there's a street there by the name of Jakes and Patterson Street. 6 months after Rosa Parks sparked the bus boycott in Montgomery, 2 Florida A&M University co-eds did the same thing here. Wilhelmina Jakes and Carrie Patterson sparked the first organized protest and successful challenge to racial segregation and discrimination in the city. They stepped onto a crowded bus at South Adams Streets and FAMU Way on May 27, 1956, and took seats next to a white passenger, and were arrested on the charge of inciting a riot. A cross was burned on their front lawn that night. Besides the street, there is this historic marker where their house was. Wanish Way was a street through FAMU. In 1966, a portion of Railroad Avenue was named after Sam Wanish, who was a lifelong resident of Tallahassee. He was the founder of the Temple Israel Synagogue. He worked 45 years for the state. He was a strong supporter of HBCs, FAMU in particular, and civil rights. He became the first Jewish mayor of Tallahassee. He also ran a cigar factory. In May 2024, this street was renamed Althea Gibson Way. She was a former Rattler tennis star who lived in Tallahassee during college, and in 1956 was the first Black to win the Grand Slam title. In November and December 2024, All of Pasco Street was broken into 2 new street names. The northern half from Orange Avenue to Tucker Street was renamed T-Pain Lane for the rapper who grew up in Tallahassee. The T stands for Tallahassee. The southern half from Orange Avenue to Bay Drive was named Anita Davis Place in honor of community activist Anita Davis, who was the first Black woman to serve as county commissioner and chair. In May 2023, Russell Street in the Bonds subdivision was named George Calvin Best Jr. Way for a Tallahassee-born civil rights worker and voting rights activist who was killed in Mississippi in 1967 while registering Black voters. As a 22-year-old student at FAMU at the time of his death, Calvin was a member of the Students Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, who had registered voters in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. In October 2024, Municipal Way was renamed Major James Morgan Jr. Way in honor of the long-serving and trailblazing law enforcement officer from the Bond community. In January 2025, the east part of Osceola Street was renamed Rudy Hubbard Way for former College Hall of Fame football coach at FAMU. Well, I'm not ignoring another former FAMU football legend, Jake Gaither. So we have Jake Gaither Gymnasium, Jake Gaither Golf Course and Tennis Courts, the Alonzo Jake Gaither Home, and Gaither Drive, all named after him. In March 2025, Okaloosa Street was renamed Dr. Carolyn Riles Way. Riles taught at FAMU High 23 years, and 3 times she was the Teacher of the Year. She owned the Copycat Center. She died in 2024. Also in March, Campbell Street was renamed E. Lillian Spencer Memorial Way for the lifelong Tallahassee resident who was a scholar athlete and a tennis champion in the segregated national tennis circuit. Her tennis legacy was discovered 70 years after her death in 1957. She graduated from Lincoln High in FAMU. Yesterday, or last night, I found a street that got renamed that I missed. And that was in October of 2022, a portion of South Bruno Street was renamed Carrie Pittman Meeks Street. She was born in Tallahassee and graduated from Lincoln High in FAMU. She served in the state legislature for 14 years and then represented the Miami area in the House of Representatives. One more street name was added in the spring of 2025. Best and Brightest Way, named for the awards program. It was taken from the northern section of Branch Street. Luckily, in that case, there were no houses or buildings on the street, so no one had to change their address. Which brings up the consequences of renaming streets. Residents of the street, both the individuals and businesses, face a mountain of paperwork. Driver's license, UPS, insurance, subscription, postal service, and businesses have to change their stationery, their forms, their business cards, and much more. Anything tied to the address needs to change. As for getting the names changed in Google and Apple Maps, the city contacts the respective service to ask them to change it, and then it's out of the local hands. Luckily, in terms of emergency response, 911, addresses are automatically changed in a local system, so you don't have to worry about that. First responders don't rely on Google, but your Uber driver might. Well, it's wonderful to honor these heroes. Most times there's nothing on the street telling us who they are. Other ways to honor them would be a well-placed plaque or a marker so we can read up on them. Or you just have to call me back in a few years. Some neighborhoods have themes. I don't know the theme of this neighborhood, but Summer and Brooke were the daughters of the developer. Lafayette Oaks has French-related names, like Napoleon Bonaparte Drive or Champagne Drive, because in July 1824, French General Marquis de Lafayette was given a 36 square mile, that's 23,000 acres, township of land in the new territory of Florida. Lafayette Oaks is there, Lafayette Lake, Frenchtown is not in there. And what does that look like? Well, there's little old Tallahassee. In Clarn Estates, the first planned community here in 1964, streets are named for places in Ireland, like Meath, Killarney, Kilkenny, Limerick, or Blarney, while Killarn Acres for racehorses, including 8 of the top 10 Kentucky Derby winners: Whirlaway, War Admiral, Citations, Secretariat, and race tracks: Hialeah, Santa Anita, Pimlico. Preakness, however, is not there. It's further south on Thomasville Road. Waverly Hills has street names for places in Scotland and works of Sir Walter Scott: Kenilworth, Lothian, Aberdeen, Stirling, and Ivanhoe. Los Robles has names related to Spanish explorers: De Soto, Ponce, Cortez, Cristobal, Fernando. Spanish names continue near the mission, with Francisco, San Pedro, Delgado. Indian Head Acres, originally Indian Head Plantation. I'm sorry. You'll just have to forgive me. As Muscogee Creek Indian names that end in "nini," meaning trail, such as Hichinini, Tobacco Trail, Chulanini, Pine Trail. Some are numbered streets up to number 9. Hokalinini, meaning second trail, Tuchinini, third, and Chukabinini, fifth, and so on. Well, First Trail was originally Humpin' Trail, but the name was changed for priority's sake to Jim Lee Road for Jim Lee Sr., a longtime state comptroller, and his son Jim Lee Jr., one of Tallahassee's most famous golfer. The Lee family once operated a cattle ranch where Rickards High is. So, we've covered French, Irish, Scottish, Spanish, and Indian. So back to other themes. Lakeshore Estates has names of warships, such as John Hancock, Skate, Candidate, and Wyoming, not named after the state. Because the land for the subdivision was purchased from a retired naval officer and he required the naming. Further west is a neighborhood about guns: Hunter's Crossing, Remington Run, Ruger, and Colt. So from guns to wars. Centerville Trace has mostly Civil War names: Harper's Ferry, Vicksburg, Chantilly, among others. But interestingly, it appears someone didn't know their wars, because they also have Monmouth and Molly Pitcher. Molly Pitcher was the nickname for Mary Ludwig Hayes, who during the Battle of Monmouth during the Revolutionary War took her husband's place at the cannon after he fell. She served as the water carrier for the troops, hence Molly Pitcher. But back to Civil War. Bull Run is a neighborhood off Thomasville Road that continues the theme with battles such as Chancellorsville, Antietam, Carthage, and names of Union generals: Farnsworth, Ulysses, Tecumseh, Burnside. But there are 2 streets near Lincoln High School named for Confederate generals: Pickett and Longstreet. Mabry Manor Street names are related to World War II. mostly generals, Eisenhower, Patton, MacArthur, except for Dale Street and Mabry Street, which was after World War I aviator Dale Mabry. Southwood has some streets named after authors born in the 1800s. Thoreau, Alcott, Twain, Whitman. And there's this lovely neighborhood called Heartwood Hills. Streets are named Valentine Road, Casanova Drive, Lochinvar. Again, Sir Walter Scott. And Shakespeare Drive, you know, his love sonnets. Lover's Lane's not there though, it's further west. There is a neighborhood between Mahan and Buck Lake where 8 street names are all lesser known California cities. Alameda, Alhambra, Tascadero, Visalia. California Street's not there, it's closer than downtown. Astoria Park is related to Oregon. Astoria, Portland, Willamette. At the end of the prime median, at the end of Meridian Road was the prime meridian marker, which was the beginning of all land surveys in the state. It was at the southwest corner of the Lafayette Land Grant. One of the original surveyors was Colonel Robert Butler, who was a surveyor general of the territory of Florida. He's buried near Crowder Road. There was a Butler Street, but it was renamed Gadsden Street, which is near the marker. He had chains laid from the marker to Georgia, so that's why Meridian is a straight road. He came to Florida with Andrew Jackson in 1824. Okay, there's the original marker, and there's the one now. It's in Cascades Park. Many road names in Tallahassee relate directly to where the road goes or who lives on the street. So in the case of decorated veteran Joe Corrin, spelled differently, he built a whole neighborhood and named the main road Corrin Drive. And another road is Proc Drive, that's his wife's maiden name. Artemis Way goes to Tallahassee Classical School. When Faith Presbyterian Church was built in 1953, its surface road was named after John Knox, founder of the Presbyterian Church of Scotland. It was just a little dirt road with a cattle gap. So what about the made-up names? Plasticola stands for Florida State College for Women. Talaflo is a combination of Tallahassee and Florida. And Talpico for the Tallahassee Pecan Company. But I thought the silliest name for a road was Boulevard Street. Street, really? Turns out it was named after Simon Bolivar, the liberator of South America. But apparently French immigrants didn't know the history of the naming of the street. So by 1836, they merged the name with the French word for wide street, which just added a D to his name. And then it morphed into Boulevard. By 1984, the entire street was renamed Martin Luther King. Railroad Avenue runs past the train station that was once bustling with travelers. A railroad, or a tram, ran along Tram Road from Quincy to a sawmill in the now ghost town of Fanlue. But let's go back to Tallahassee family names way back in our history. We know the story of the Collins and the Calls and the Grove, but some of the men are a little more obscure. In early Tallahassee, these families had plantations and or homes downtown, and they knew each other, married into each other's families, bought and sold houses to each other. Benjamin Chairs Road. 3 brothers, Greenhill, Benjamin, and Thomas Peter Chairs, had the evergreen hills, Vendura, pictured here, and woodlawn plantations. Benjamin built the columns in 1830. The Cheers brothers produced bricks and supplied the bricks for the second state capitol building. Hardy Croom Court. The Croom family from North Carolina began purchasing land in North Florida in the 1820s, including plantations in Mariana, Quincy, and Tallahassee. Hardy Brian Croom, a planter and recognized naturalist, discovered the rare Torreya taxifolia tree and a small plant named Croomia in his honor. The 2,400 acres upon which Goodwood Plantation was sited was purchased by Hardy Croom from the Lafayette Land Grant in 1834. A monument to him is at the St. John's Episcopal Church. In 1837, he and his immediate family perished in the wreck of the steamship Home. His younger brother Brian Croom became the owner of Goodwood in the 1840s, and by 1845 he owned 2,500 acres of land in Leon County alone, making him one of the wealthiest men in the territory. He also had land in Gadsden County. So while we're talking about the Crumbs, we must mention John S. Winthrop. John built a home at 1610 North Monroe Street in 1890. This is that home. I want to give you an idea about the homes back then. Let me describe this one. There were 16 rooms, some paneled in oak and some in cherry. The chandeliers and mirrors were elaborate. The windows were leaded and stained glass. It later went to John's son, Francis B. Winthrop, who served a term of mayor of Tallahassee, and his wife, Gertrude Chittenden, remember that family? Winthrop, who lived there from 1910 to 1925, and his brother Guy and his wife Adabel lived there after that. Winthrop inherited Benton Hills from a litigation suit involving the death of Hardy Brian Crooms. Winthrop Road, Way, and Park are named for Guy, who sold the land to the Fletchers for the building of the Tallahassee Memorial Hospital. Benton Road in Benton Hills. Benton Hills is named after Turbo R. Benton from Maryland, who with his father Joseph opened a general store in 1826, and they ran the business for 20 years. In 1827, Turbo purchased 1,200 acres from the Lafayette Land Grant between Centerville and Thomasville Roads. Out of St. Mark's, the Turbo Benton schooner transported cotton and agricultural goods to the northeast and to the Tallahassee general stores and plantations. He was one of the founders of St. John's Episcopal Church and is buried there. It was after his death in 1863 that the property ended up with members of the Winthrop family, and Guy developed the area. That's the ship. Okay. One of Turbo's sons, Dr. George W. Benton, bought this house in Southside Park between Calhoun and Gadsden about 1859. He maintained his office in the basement. After the war, federal troops were stationed here, and they used the basement for their horses. In 1880, he lived at the southeast corner of Park and Calhoun, and once again had his office in the basement. This house. It was built by Proctor, and we will get to him. According to a patient, when Dr. Benton made house calls, he rode a bicycle. Quote, a contraption with one big wheel about 5 feet tall in front with a much smaller wheel behind, end quote. Palmer Avenue was named after Dr. Henry Edwards Palmer, who was in medical practice with Dr. Benton in the late 1800s. He owned property on the south side of Tallahassee. Palmer was a member of the State Board of Health from 1889 to 1935. and a president of the Florida Medical Association. He was a staunch advocate for saving the live oak trees during the early 1940s. He was married first to Maud Myers. Among the children he had with 2 wives, 3 also became doctors, Thomas, George, and Martin. Here he is at the 100-year celebration, which takes us to Myers Park Drive, Myers Park Lane. Frederick Towel Myers was a senator. He was considered one of the most distinguished lawyers in the history of Florida, and it was generally believed he would become governor. But it said he was, quote, sold down the river, end quote, by political underhandedness. Maud Myers, wife of Dr. Palmer, was his niece. His Aunt Mary Myers was the first May Queen, crowned in 1844. And this is his house. Appleyard Drive. Colonel Thomas Jefferson Appleyard was born in Richmond, Virginia in 1850 and served as a drummer boy in the Civil War from age 12 to 15. He was apprenticed to the largest printing house in Richmond at age 11. He continued as a printer all of his life. He was the secretary of the Florida State Senate from 1895 to 1905 and state printer for many years, starting in 1909. In 1918, he built the building that was sold to Rose Printing Company in the 1930s. He was a founding member of the Florida Press Association and was the first chair of the Tallahassee Chamber of Commerce. He died in 1931, and the governor and the cabinet served as pallbearers of his Confederate flag wrapped casket for a state funeral held at the Capitol. Brevard Street. Theodore Washington Brevard was best known for having served as a general in the Confederate Army. He was captured by General George Custer. Brevard was a lawyer who served in both the Florida House and Senate. He married Governor Call's daughter, Mary Call. Their son was Dr. Ephraim M. Brevard, and the daughter was historian educator Caroline Mays Brevard. They moved to the Brevard House on the southwest corner of Brevard and Monroe, which was built in 1833 by Francis Epps. Bradford Court, Bradford Road, Bradfordville Road, Bradfordville, Lake Bradford, Bradford County. Brothers Thomas Anderson Bradford, Dr. Edward Bradford, Richard Henry Bradford, pictured here, Henry Bowen Bradford. Were prominent plantation owners in Leon County of Water Oak, this house, Walnut Hill, Edgewood, Pine Hill, and Horseshoe plantations. The area became known as Bradfordville. Most family members are married in the Bradford Epps Cemetery in that area. The 4 brothers took turns hosting the annual 4th of July celebration. This massive barbecue and many times a fishing party on Lake Anemone was held for the slave populations of these plantations. No whites were allowed to attend or interfere with these festivities. Richard Henry Bradford Jr. was killed in the Civil War in 1861 and could very well have been the first Floridian killed in that war. The Bradfords are direct descendants of William Bradford of the Mayflower. Epps Drive. Francis Wales Epps was the Reform Intendant, Mayor, of Tallahassee from 1841 to 1844. He planted the avenue of oaks which shaded Brevard Street. He had been a cotton planter. He was a grandson of President Thomas Jefferson. Long interested in education, in 1856, he donated land and money to designate a school in Tallahassee as one of the first two state-supported seminaries, now known as Florida State University. He served as president of the Board of Trustees for 8 years. Speaking of FSU, you may be interested in knowing that on the hilltop where Westcott Fountain was the original execution grounds known as Gallows Hill in the territorial period. Proctor Road, Street and Trail. George Proctor was a master builder and architect who built several homes for Tallahassee elites. He was one of the 4 free people of color in Tallahassee in about 1830. He was the son of Antonio Proctor, who was an Indian interpreter for the U.S. government and accompanied Dr. Simmons on his trek from St. Augustine to explore this area to become the capital in 1823. Here's a picture, a 1955 picture of the Rutgers House that George Proctor built before 1850 for Henry L. Rutger, a banker and former territorial treasurer. It is now owned by the Tallahassee Garden Club. Reverend Paul Russell Road and Circle. Reverend Mumford Russell, pictured here, served many terms as county commissioner. He owned land southeast of town and named the street there after his son Paul, who became a government official who operated the fairgrounds. Blairstone Road, Courtney Lane. Blair Casper Stone was the vice president, Southern Division manager of the Southeastern Telephone Company and a prominent civic leader. In 1959, at age 50, he died of a stroke during the night after a workday. He was a past president of the Rotary Club and Chamber of Commerce. He was also a past president of the Capital City Country Club and a member of the Oaks Lodge. The pallbearers at his funeral included Raymond Deal, probably Jr. Raymond Deal Road and Deal Drive were named after Raymond Deal Sr., who owned the property in the area. They were both plumbers. Another pallbearer was Charles Osley. Osley Road was named for Dr. Charles Merritt Osley, who was a prominent physician, and in 1934, the chairman of the county commission. Since he died in 1940, the pallbearer must have been his son, lawyer and former city commissioner and mayor, George Saxon Osley, who, by the way, was crowned May King in 1924. George Saxon, his grandfather, founded what is now Capital City Bank and donated land for the governor's mansion, and sure enough, there's a Saxon Street. W. Wilson Caraway was listed as another pallbearer. Not sure who he was, or maybe it was a typo in the obituary, but there is a Caraway Street. The street may have been named after Franklin Wilson Caraway Jr., pictured here, who served in the Florida State Senate from 1955 to 1965. During his tenure, he held the position of Senate President. Before that, he served in the Florida House of Representatives, and the Caraway Building is named after him. Or the street may have been named after his father, Franklin Wilson Caraway Sr., whose house is pictured here, who worked for the Coca-Cola Bottling Company. He married Polly Lively, daughter of Lewis Matthew Lively. Lively Street, Lively Tech. When Coca-Cola and bottled drinks came to the market in the early 1900s, Lewis Matthew Lively, Francis S. Lively, and Robert Gamble incorporated the Middle Florida Ice Company. Okay, this has nothing to do with street names, but here's an employee taking a break on an ice chair with his newspaper and his cigarette, and I just thought it was cool. Anyway, so to speak. Lively Votech is named after L.M. Lively. His parents were Matthew Lively, who was a druggist, and Emily Benton. Round and round we go. He was a member of the city council. He was a member of Lions and Elks, Lodges and Rotary Club. And here is his house. Southwest Corner Park in Gadsden, built in 1912. Gamble Street was named for Major Robert Howard Gamble, who was married to Martha Chairs. He was comptroller from 1868 to 1873. Major Gamble was noted for outstanding bravery during the Second Seminole War. He was the son of John Grattan Gamble, a noted banker, gentleman farmer, and promoter who was the president of Union Bank in 1835. At that time, it became Territorial Florida's major bank. It was closed in 1843 due to the Panic of 1837, Seminole Wars, and unsound banking practices. After the Civil War, the building was used for the Freedmen's Bank for a few years, and then over many years, a large number of businesses and shops. Gamble Street on FAMU campus was renamed Robert and Trudy Perkins Way in 2021. They were active in the Civil Rights Movement and graduates of FAMU. Trudy was one of the first black nurses at TMH. Mahan Drive, Mahan Center Boulevard. Fred Alfred Mahan was a businessman and horticulturist and well known throughout the state of Florida, having created the Mahan pecan while working in his own nursery in Monticello, where he's buried. Mahan's nursery donated plants to the County Unemployment Relief Commission to be used for beautification of highways, churchyards, and cemeteries in late 1932. He also donated more plants for the project of the road department in 1935 to beautify and improve the highways from Tallahassee to Monticello and to clean up the many dead stumps along the right-of-way across Lake Miccosukee. Tennessee Street becomes Mahan Drive at Magnolia, though this marker is further west on Tennessee Street. Pedrick Road. Carl Douglas Pedrick was the Leon County Road Superintendent for more than 25 years, from 1925 to his death in 1952 at age 59. Dick Wilson Boulevard, where Sam's Club is. Richard Dick Pruitt Wilson, graduated from Leon High, worked in all branches of Florida state government, served as city commissioner, and was mayor of Tallahassee in 1980 and 1981. So we've talked here today about names of men used extensively throughout Tallahassee in the early days. I want you to realize that during the antebellum years, 1823 to 1865, every single one of the governors, landowners, and plantation owners were also slave owners. Well, I could go on for days and days, but I must come to an end. Thank you.
Dave Lang speaking up to say something about Lake Bradford or something?
I didn't listen.
Yeah, that's not a Bradford.
The lake isn't, okay.
Any questions? Anybody got any streets that ought to be named? Well, Karen, thank you very much. We try to give a little honorarium to people when they speak to us, and so here is a copy of Alexander Key's other novels set in Apalachicola. He wrote two of them, The Wrath and the Wind, and this is the second one, Island Lights, set in Apalachicola at the end of the Civil War. And Alexander Key Alexander Key was a very fine writer, lived down there up until World War II.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, November the 11th, we are scheduled to have a representative of the Miccosukee tribe here to speak to us. They're one of our generous partners, as you know. The question is, we don't know who it's going to be. They're having tribal elections on November the 4th. And Ed Ornstein, who is their general counsel, and who himself is a very good speaker, so it might be him. But he says, you know, we don't know, we're a little bit nervous because we've got two people running for this election who really don't like each other very much. We have very different views on what the tribe should be doing about all of this. And so that should be very entertaining. Then in December, of course, we have Sheriff's Deputy Dave Teams going to talk about the history of the Sheriff's Department. So lots of stuff coming up this year. Here's one right here. Sandy, do you want to say anything about the Capitol conversations?
I can't get up.
You can't get up? Okay. Well, let me look at this here. On October 25th, Wayne Tedder, who's the assistant city manager, is going to be speaking at the old log cabin down there on just how they made Cascades Park, how Cascades Park came to be. And if you know about the history down there, you know that it was a dump, it was a Superfund site and so forth, and now look at it. It's just an amazing transformation. So we've got all sorts of stuff coming up. On the way out tonight, there are some goodies for you, some moon pies with our logo on them. Thanks to Becky Berenson for doing all of that. So thank you very much. We will see you in November, if not before. How about that? Thank you.